Hi everyone, today we're going to be talking about HTML form submission. Now this should be on the back of you recapping what we know about forms at Higher. So let's have a look at what we need to know at Advanced Higher. Okay, in the implementation part of the assessment is for learning sheets or the arrangements from the SQA, you can see what information we need to know about HTML forms and HTML in general. So it starts off with saying we need to know what form elements are, action and methods, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. You should have already recapped input, select and text area and being able to set them a name and a value, and that's what you've been working on your forms previously, and obviously the things that you remember from Higher. We've also been recapping our use of tables, making sure that we understand the difference between table headings and table rows and table data. Okay, so hopefully most of the information there will not be new to you. What we're going to just do is extend that a little bit by looking at the different form elements, action and method today. So let's start off with action. Now, basically what action does is that just at the moment what we've done is we created forms, they look good, we can fill out information, but all that really happens is we get a pop-up alert because we're not actually sending that information anywhere. At Advanced Higher, what we're doing is we're starting to use servers, which means that we have access to information that we can then send to somewhere else. Okay, in order to be able to send the information somewhere else and to be able to get the form to actually do something, we have to add these two new form elements called action and method right inside our form tag inside HTML. Now, usually that would just open a form, all the information would be inside, and then we would close the form at the bottom. But now what we're doing is add an action and method into our form tag to allow us to access it. And what action does is tells you the name of the PHP file you want to link your form to. Okay, so action is really, really easy. You're going to have a PHP form made next to your HTML document where your form is located, and it's going to be linking, it's going to be right next to each other, saved in the same folder is what I mean. Okay, and you just give it the exact same name, and obviously your file type would be PHP. Okay, and we're going to go on to have a little look at what method is and what the two different types of methods are. So they have to be stored next to each other to be able to execute correctly, or you'd have to change the file path in here to be able to get to your PHP form. Okay, so action is just the name of the file you're looking for. Method is how you're going to pull that file up. And at Advanced Higher, we need to know about two hypertext transfer protocol methods, which are known as get and post. Now, effectively, they do the same thing, but in two different ways, and it's to do with security. And you'll see with this week's tasks, when you're doing some of the exam questions, post is used a lot more often than get because it is more secure. So let's talk through what the difference is, what they look like, and some of the advantages and disadvantages. Okay, get. If you submit a form using the get method, basically what happens is it takes all of the information out of your form, appends a question mark to the end, and you can see it in the URL of the link that you are following. And I'm going to give you a practical demonstration of this in a wee second. Okay, the browser will store that information as part of your web browsing history, and the get request will have all the information there. And the reason that we would use get is when we were using non-sensitive data. So for example, you'll see it in places like if you're searching on a website like on Amazon for digital cameras, if you do a search in the search bar, quite often the URL at the top will change and you'll see the words that you've typed into the search box up there. So that's what a get method does. Okay, advantages of using the get method, well, there's a number of them. Okay, first of all, if security is an issue, the URL can be bookmarked, and if it's something you're going to be looking at again and again, perhaps you're thinking about buying a new car, for example, you're always going on to AutoTrader, you're putting in the same search criteria, your computer can kind of save that URL, save that search, and it can be reused again and again and submitted quite easily. Another good thing about it is if you have a network issue, maybe the connection just didn't quite work the first time between trying to load a web page, and we've all come across this before, and you just have to press back and try again. With the get method, if you filled out the whole form, the form details will usually be saved, and because the browser knows that it's not sensitive data, it just resends the form for you automatically. There's nothing worse than if you fill a whole form out, maybe if you're paying for something, and then it gets stuck trying to go to the next page, it bunches you back out, you don't know whether you've paid for it or not, and you're really kind of worried about filling out the form again in case you get charged twice. So with the get method, it'd be non-sensitive data, so it just resends it again, and you wouldn't even really realise that a network connection issue had potentially happened. Okay, the last thing is, I suppose, kind of what I mentioned already, is that the get submission can be cached and stored somewhere. So if it's something that you're looking for regularly, then it can have a real significant impact on your efficiency. If it's something you're doing again and again, it could be stored in your cache memory rather than all the way back in RAM or in your hard drive somewhere, and it means that your computer will work a little bit quicker. Okay, now the main disadvantages are to do with security. So because all of the form data is in the URL itself, your web address, it's very visible, and it's not secure if you're signing up for something, if you're paying for something, because you don't want your bank details or your passwords to be visible in a URL anywhere. Okay, also URLs can only contain ASCII codes, obviously depending on what type of browser you're using and how the web pages are set up. But for the most part, they're using ASCII codes, which means that if you're creating a form and the form perhaps has some input in it which wouldn't be an ASCII code, that can cause an issue because the URL won't be able to pass that information on. It can corrupt data at the other end. So that's another disadvantage of using GET. And the last one is that it will be stored on your computer. So obviously your web browser, unless you clear it, will store your history of everything you've been accessing. So if you've got sensitive data that's been passed into a form, not only has that been kind of insecure through that actual passing method, but then afterwards your web browser history will save that on your computer, and it could be hacked by somebody much later on than you actually the day you visit that web page. Okay, then we have a little look at oh sorry, I've missed one. And URLs can only have a set number of characters due to the size that is given to store them. So, and again, that's depending on browser and computers and word size and all that type of stuff. But the limits to the form data means that you can't store anything too large. So it means that you're not going to be able to have forms that are really, really big and use the get method. Okay, then we look at post. Now, post does exactly the same thing. So what post does is still lets you fill out a form. It still sends the information somewhere else. But what happens is the form data itself is encoded within a message in the background. So we don't see that appearing in the URL, which means it is much more secure. Okay, so advantages are that the data, first of all, is not visible. So it is much more secure than using the get method. Okay. Basically you'll see that these are complete opposites of each other. So there's no because it's not in the URL, there's no requirement for it to be ASCII characters only, which means that they can be submitted, any different types of characters can be submitted, even ones that would be part of Unicode and things. And there's no URL character limit because the data is not in the URL, in which case it's being passed in the background, and there's no limit to the size of the form that can be filled out. However, there are disadvantages. So, as we said earlier on, we can't bookmark the form for it to be used later on. It can't be cached for it to be used later on to make your computer run more efficiently. And also, if there's that network issue that we already talked about with the form kind of buffering or not maybe getting to the next web page, then you do have to fill out the form again and resubmit it. And obviously, you don't know whether this has or hasn't went, and especially if you're paying for something, it can be really kind of ropey. Okay. So the recommended use is if you are doing something with sensitive data, for example, you're signing up to something, especially if you're doing something banking, you're paying for something, you're always going to use post. And get is more often used for doing searches and things when you're within a website and you're maybe looking for something and it's not sensitive data that you're typing in there. Okay, especially if you're going to have any specialized characters in the form, or if it's going to be a longer form, they would be posted. They would be done using post because it would mean that you can have free reign of the size and the type of the information that is in your form. All right. So here's an example of what it might look like. So at the top there, we've got a wee example of the action in the form and being in use. Okay, if we were to use the get method to load the application.submission submission.php form, it would look like this. Okay, so all you're doing is replacing the name here inside the action section and the method, which is get, and they are keywords, so they should be in capitals, get and post. You put that inside the method. It doesn't matter what order these two things are in. So method could come before action, as long as you have the quotation marks and the equals in the right place, it still works, okay? In the second example, we're trying to use the post method, the secure method, to load a PHP file called customer query. Again, you fill it out exactly the same. So it's really, really, really not difficult. All right. Now let's have a look at what that looks like in an exam style question. So this is an exam style question from maybe last year's exam or the year before's exam paper maybe, or it could be a prelim, I can't remember. But anyway, this is an exam style question. They're quite often worth 2 marks, and they're a very, very easy 2 marks to pick up at advanced higher. So you can see you're given a wee example of a form there. You're given most of the coding for the form, and what you're asked to do is just to complete the form line. So it says write the missing attributes needed to complete line 34 of the form element that allows users to securely send a review to a page called submission.php. Okay, now your keywords in there are submission.php. You can see it in a different kind of text, that's really important, but also securely send. Okay, so you're going to either get information on whether it's something needs to be sent secure or the security is not an issue, and then use that to fill it out. So the answer there would just be action equals submission.php, method equals post, capital letters, because you've been asked for it secure. If it wasn't said that it had to be secure, then that could be a get method. If it doesn't say, then you can presume, but to be honest, if you put something as secure, it's never going to be a bad thing. Okay, again, they can be the opposite way around, and you would pick up 2 marks for that. Now, the only other real difference I've seen in some exam paper questions, and I'm going to give you some of these to do this week, is that you might get asked to fill out some more. So, for example, you might get asked to write the code to actually make this form. So it might be a 3 mark question where you're being asked to add a little bit more other than just the first line, but most of the questions have 2 marks for this first line and then maybe an additional mark for some almost higher level coding underneath with regards to some form elements. Okay, now once you've completed the past paper questions as this week's task, what I also want you to do is I want you to extend your 2 forms that you made last week into actually working PHP forms. Okay, so on the left you will have 2 copies, your school UCAS application, your home learning form that you've made, and I want you to move them from wherever you are and make sure they're saved in your my app part of your servers, for those of you who have working servers. Okay, you're going to pop them into there, and I'm going to show you how you get it so that when you click on the end of the form it comes up with a page like this. Okay, so here I've got my Notepad++. This is my school UCAS application form builder here. You will have something very similar. If I zoom in, you will see that what I have added is this information here to my form tag. Now my action is pointing to a PHP file called formsubmission.php, and I'll open that up in a wee second to show you what it looks like. My method is get at the moment because I'm going to show you what it looks like get and post. Now if you have a little think about what this form is, it's a UCAS application. We're sending information potentially about what grades or something we've got, so you might want that to be sent as a post method. Again, it's quite a large form, there's quite a lot of information going on, so you might want it to be a bit more secure. Okay, so there's either way you could do it. I would suggest trying both methods out just so you can see what it looks like. Okay, across in the same directory file right next to each other, I have created this really simple PHP form. So it's got like a HTML header and footer, just kind of got itself set up. And then in the middle, it's got PHP, and it's literally just 2 lines. It's a header saying form submit, and then a wee paragraph saying thank you for your form. Your guidance teacher will be in contact with you soon. Okay, now if I go, now remember you're not going to be able to run this from in Chrome, you're going to have to actually go in and launch your local host and get your server up and running and then fill the information out. Now I haven't taken off the alert, so you should see quickly the alert that happens from just clicking the button earlier on, and then you should see the next step after, right? So let's just fill this out. Kim Jean, Scottish candidate number 1056566. Sad that I can remember that, right? Mrs. Harrower is my guidance teacher. I want to leave school 6, and obviously I'm applying for computing science, so pop that in. Okay, and press submit. Now when I press submit, what you can see is it pops up with the normal client-side alert, and if we press OK, it should then take us to our second page, which is our PHP file. And you can see in the URL, if you look closely, how all of my personal data is in there. Okay, now if we want to make that more secure, I'm going to go across to here. I'm going to change this get to a post. Let me save that, minimize. I'm going to go back, and I just need to make sure that I've refreshed this. Okay, type my details in again quickly. This is our after S6. I'm just going to put CS to make it quick. Okay, and press submit. And you can see this time, none of my data is up here. Okay, so have a go at doing that with both of your forms. Answer the past paper questions. Pop some evidence So screenshots of how you got on, and I look forward to see how you do. Okay, speak to you later.